All right.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our midweek conversation. This will be the last one for a little while because we have our last but not least guest preacher here with us. This is Madeline Luzinski. Madeline, thank you for preaching and for joining us today.
Thanks, Will. Like Will said, my name is Madeline, and I am a ordained deacon in the United Methodist Conference. If you watched the sermon on Sunday, I introduced myself a little bit that way, but maybe if you hadn't seen the sermon, I wanted to make sure I said that. I'm currently serving as the chaplain at the Florida United Methodist Children's Home. So my day-to-day work is with kids that are in the foster care system or who have experienced trauma, and I get to be their pastor. And it's my dream job, so I love being here. And getting to work with these kids. And it's really great to be with you all today.
Gosh, yeah. What rewarding / difficult / joy-filled / grief-driven job. Vocation, calling,
yes,
life.
All of that.
Yeah. So I want to start off with kind of a practical question and then kind of move into the particular pieces of your sermon.
Sure.
And one of my favorite questions to ask has been, what's your process for writing a sermon? And then maybe talk about how is this one different than writing sermons just for children or youth?
Yeah. I was also really excited about the opportunity to preach outside of my normal context because it does change your just thinking in general. And especially it's always challenging when you are preaching to people you don't know as well. When I preach to the kids at the children's home, like we've had plenty of conversations during the week, so I can kind of base things off of what I know is the temperature of the room. And when you're doing that, to a congregation you haven't met, or in this case, like even virtually, like you literally can't even see them. It's a completely different mindset. But my process has actually changed in the last 4 years that I've been in full-time ministry. I think I used to be a lot more rigid with it, and now I've kind of learned to the ebb and flow. And I think some of that was just kind of, and you could probably attest to this, the anxiety of having this hanging over your head every week. So I usually start with a passage, I read it early in the week, and I just kind of let it marinate like for several days and kind of let it speak to me in different ways. I read it over and over again. I think about it. I pull out a theme that I might be interested in, and then I look for where my experiences that week kind of speak into that, because the beauty of Scripture is that the Spirit is often speaking into whatever we're reading. And so then by my writing day is usually Thursday, is the day that I finally sit down and like actually write what I've been thinking about all week. And I sometimes prompt people with questions that are, subconsciously about my, they don't know it's about my sermon, but it is. And so that's kind of my general process of how I do that. And I obviously spend some time in commentaries and things like that. But for this sermon, I had actually, confession, preached the sermon before.
Confession. This is a confessional.
This is a confessional. And it really struck a chord with me. It struck a chord with the kids. And when I was reflecting on, what can I speak into people's lives right now? What can I speak into the lives of people I've never met? This kept coming up, like this idea of what we have control over, what we don't have control over, just feeling in the middle of the life that we're in right now. And so I pulled it out, and obviously instead of like doing my complete total writing process, was doing a little bit different. I did change a lot of things about the way that I'd originally done it, because I knew I wasn't preaching to kids this time. And so, yeah, I just try to reflect on who I'm talking to and where they might be. And more often than not, I found, and maybe you found this too, that the best sermons that we ever preach are the ones that we need to hear the most.
Yeah.
And I think that this is one of those sermons. Like in this calendar year, if I picked a handful of sermons, this would be in that handful of like a sermon that I needed to hear at that moment. And so it turned out to be one of the more powerful ones, even for the folks that didn't write it.
Yeah. it always ends up being, I mean, my best sermons are the ones I'm most engaged with, is the ones that are particularly for me, that I'm experiencing. And I
Hmm.
think it's because, I mean, first off, you become more authentic with it because you're like, oh, this is near and dear to my heart, to my soul.
Hmm.
Um, and you're like, I need to say this. And then secondly, if you're feeling it, somebody else is feeling that thing.
Hmm.
Somebody else is feeling powerless. Somebody else is feeling like the puzzle pieces, you don't have all of them. I mean, those type of things. Somebody else has felt that. And if you're feeling it and you're articulating that feeling, that thought, that emotion, it's going to connect and resonate with somebody else too.
Hmm.
So yeah, I feel the same exact thing. Of, I mean, if I'm feeling it, somebody else is, and those are typically my best sermons.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think my worst sermons are actually my best ones. Um,
Yeah.
and then, or my worst sermons happening to my best ones, or I think my best sermons happening to my worst ones.
Yeah.
Like
And
that one
that,
sounded so good, but it was terrible.
hmm well, and it's also the moments I feel like where we feel least prepared, right? Where that turn out the best. And some of that I think is finally, as humans, the like, again, this kind of goes into the theme of like letting go of control. And I mean, I have those Sundays where I'm driving to church and I'm going, Spirit, I need you to show up because I just practiced this thing. I really don't know what's going to turn out with this, but I know that you're able to like take this and do something with it. So I really need you to show up with me today. And those are the Sundays that stuff comes out of my mouth that I literally am like, that's God.
Yeah.
I did not think about that ahead of time. I have no idea. But in the moment, there we are. And that's, to me, probably what makes me so excited about preaching, is those moments where you really do kind of let go and God kind of intercedes.
Yeah. And there are also sometimes the scary moments because you're like, this was not a part of my script. This was not a part of my outline. I don't know where this came from, but I'm feeling it. I'm vibing. And then you're
Yep.
like, wow, that was really good. And then you move on
Mm-hmm.
to the next point. You're like, man, how much that was just really good. I could stop right there. And
Yep.
spirit works like that a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, thank you for sharing it. That's helpful. The kind of and good confessional, good
Yeah.
confessional. All right, so I want to ask a personal question. From your very beginning, you talk about your stubbornness.
Uh-huh.
What do you think? Do you think it's something that's innately in you of being stubborn and wanting to like kind of control everything? Do you think it's something the way in which you grew up? Is it a human trait that we're all stubborn at some point?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of the things. Like kind of how I mentioned, toddlers being the most stubborn humans that I've ever met. And I do think that there is some of that comes with us when we're starting to develop our own will and our own agency, that we want to use it. And so, we exercise it and we try it out. I think that maybe I just also am created stubborn. My mom would, like I said, shared, would probably articulate that. She'd be like, yeah, from the beginning, just stubborn. I do think some of it's also being the firstborn. There's a lot of stuff that goes into like birth order, and I'm the firstborn, so I kind of paved the way. I'm the independent one. I'm the guinea pig as far as my parents are concerned. And so kind of wanting to establish myself. I think that's just part of that as well. And then I think for me, if you get into like personality types, if you're someone who can be driven more by fear of failure, I'm someone who knows that my fear of failure is probably like one of my shadow sides, if we use like Richard Rohr
Yeah.
language. And so in order to not fail, I feel like I try to, manage everything so that then I won't fail. Which obviously is something to work on
Yeah. Yeah.
because there are lots of things that are beneficial about failing and not getting it right. So yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I think it's also one of those things that many people can relate to, that stubbornness. We all probably know someone in our lives who is pretty strong-willed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting that you kind of bring up the shadow sides because I mean, we all have some sort of shadow side
Mm-hmm.
about our personality, which oftentimes is the inverse of our greatest strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it sounds like your your asset is able to thrive when you're able to recognize your deepest your flaw, your the thing that you're working on. That's when you deal with your shadow side and are able to articulate and even laugh about it. Yeah, I'm stubborn. I know that. I know that I want to get my way at everything. It's like, okay, you're able to articulate it, and then you can move beyond it.
Right.
And that's kind of helped you, I think, even in talking about the sermon, of moving some of that stubbornness. Yeah. So I had one question. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but the first thing that you talked about was, or when you were reading the scripture, I kept thinking about the place of Capernaum.
Yeah.
And you and I visited Capernaum together.
Yeah. We
Which,
have a picture in front of the
yes.
city sign.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's a beautiful place with these ancient ruins. And I'm wondering if when you were working on this, or when you were doing some of the commentary, or when you were thinking about this space, did our experience at Capernaum shift or change kind of your sermon, or come into your mind or anything as you were doing this?
Yeah, I think one of the gifts of that trip that we went on is that you can actually imagine the place that you're reading about. And I like pictured the mosaic sign that we walked past that was like the entering the gates of Capernaum. And I think about how many key moments of Jesus's ministry kind of happened there, particularly in the book of Matthew. And so, yeah, that was something that I did reflect on. And I also think that this passage, I've heard it preached from Lily Jennings when we were in seminary too. And so this passage in this moment of this interaction between Jesus and a Gentile, Jesus and someone who's not part of the faith, in Capernaum, which is like where a lot of things went down, is kind of one of these like bedrock kind of stories in scripture for us to kind of go back to a lot. And so that's why when I was even originally writing this sermon and thinking about the themes of control and all of that I came to this particular passage, was because it seems like one of those that's like an important mark in the gospel.
Yeah. Wow. That's a very implicit thing that you're doing, which I think is so beautiful, of like, oh, this is something that wouldn't have happened. This is something that would be wild and chaotic and crazy, and Jesus should not have talked to this person or done this miracle. Wow, yeah, that's good. That's really good. So I have like 3 or 4 kind of themes, questions, maybe asking you to expound upon a few things.
Sure.
You talked about the meaning of faith. What is your meaning of faith? What is the purpose? How would you define it? And I know that's like an hour-long conversation.
It is.
But
I do think that what I've learned, and particularly what this season of COVID and 2020 and just the past couple of years of my life where I've had to really reckon with this concept of powerlessness, and is that I've learned that faith is this abiding. It's this like dwelling with. And in my mind, I think a lot of times I had it for a while that like faith had to be this assurance, like this confidence, this strength, this like go get 'em kind of like, It was very much a bold idea. And I think what I've learned, and that's what we see with the centurion, is this boldness. But I think what I've also learned is that faith has a much softer side, a gentle side, a side that is like, I do spiritual direction. Pastors should have pastors, and my pastor is a spiritual director. And we've had a lot of conversations about light and where's the light. And in these moments of darkness, or these moments where I feel powerless and helpless and sad or angry or whatever, I imagine my faith as a candle, like a very small light, like a tea light that's sitting with me, and that's the only light in the room. And that's my faith, is it doesn't have to be in like where you can get into all the parables of the mustard seed and stuff. It doesn't have to be this big thing. Like it doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be confident all the time. But it's just simply there. And I think that to me is the most important definition of faith, is that it is always there. And sometimes it's there in spite of us.
Yeah.
Like when I might be sitting with my back to the candle, like it's still there. And I might be sitting there going like, where is this? Like, where is God? Blah, blah, blah. But the whole time, like, there's just this abiding that's
Yeah.
happening, whether or not I'm always conscious of it.
How interesting is when you turn your back to the candle, the light reflects and you get to see their shadow in front of you. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, that's a that's an image. Oh man. Yeah, that's good. That's really, really good because a lot of times when I think about faith, and conversations I've had with church members, with people, it's like this thing that's this massive, huge tree, this strong foundation. And I think faith can be that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are also moments, particularly now, where we're at of like maybe faith is like this small little light or this small little like the small little charge. Like my image is like a 9-volt battery,
Mm-hmm.
and when you like put your tongue on a 9-volt battery, it like shocks you a little bit. Have you ever done
Yeah.
that? Maybe, no, maybe that's
Don't do that, but yeah.
okay. Maybe your kids have probably done it at the children's.
Sure.
But like it's not a big shock, but it's like a little shock to
Mm-hmm.
let you know, like, yeah, this thing has power. Especially
Mm-hmm.
if it's almost dead. They
Mm-hmm.
never actually. I don't think they ever actually go out of batteries.
Mm-hmm.
They get a little less and less. And that's my image of like, oh, it's just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But faith is always there.
Yeah, it's like so often, and maybe this is a disservice that the church has like instilled in people somehow, is that faith is this confidence in it, and it's a has to be. It's like a knowing,
Hmm.
Faith is often not knowing,
Yeah.
and still like sticking around
Yeah.
even when you don't know. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Even oh gosh, even when you don't have any words for it, like
yeah.
sometimes we want to be able to articulate exactly what we believe,
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I know, a doctrine, and it's like I think sometimes faith is those things that you can't articulate. You just feel. You just
Mm-hmm.
have this presence, and it's like it's a peace that passes all understanding in all words. It's just
Mm-hmm.
this thing that's within you that you just experience.
Mm-hmm. And
And it works.
the biggest thing is like that we all get afraid of is when that feeling like goes away, right? Or
Yeah,
that we can't find it. Like to me, it's more of a can't find it. Like it's always there, but we just
mm,
can't find it. Like we're
yeah,
looking, the wrong direction.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's where like that's the beauty of our community then, right? Is that hopefully the church is the body in which if someone's frantically searching around in the dark trying to find their faith, that someone else can be like, well, here, let you borrow my, light for a minute to find yours. Or
Oh yeah, what a that's a great parable.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's so many different ways. So many ways I want to go. I think sometimes we want to have a certainty about faith, yet God always pushes us around our uncertainty. I think that's kind of the piece of this sermon you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think also sometimes we think God is out there somewhere. Like when we say, God, come and be with us, I don't think that's a good prayer. I think it should be, I always pray, God, reveal where you are at. Because
Right.
God is
Wow.
always present, always near. And even when we can't see him or her, when we can't see God, it's like, God, show where you are working in the midst of this. Show me what the candle is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Wow.
man, that's good. That's good stuff. Okay. Next question, observation. I loved your image or idea about how long it takes for you to realize that you are powerless. So you kind of went on this like 4 or 5 sentence piece of, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it was something like, do you realize that you are powerless in this
Mm-hmm.
situation? Do you realize you are powerless in this situation? It went through these 5. And then you made the image of like, I think you said you talked about yourself of like, sometimes I try A, then B, then C, then D, then it isn't until E that I realize I'm powerless. And sometimes it's not until Z that you realize you're powerless.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I wonder, what are the things that help speed up the recognition or the acknowledgement of that?
Yeah. And I think everyone's going to be different on this. I think some of it's a relearning or an unlearning at times is like, so in recovery programs, you have the 12 steps, and the first step is recognizing that you're powerless. And a lot of times you pray the Serenity Prayer, which is one that we maybe have all heard, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think if you're always looking at things through that frame, right? Of like, this thing is happening. Can I actually change what's happening? Or what in this can I change? That helps you get A, B, C, D in order in a different way than it's just like, this thing is happening and I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to do, all the things, instead of like kind of creating a pause and taking a step back and saying, okay, if this thing is happening, what role do I have to play in it? And a lot of times it's just, to me, it's like this like spiritual language and spiritual awareness. And I see this a lot more with folks who are like spiritual directors, is they have just a better language about this, about like, or just always on the lookout for how God is working, kind of what you're saying, like how God, reveal yourself here in this moment, like what's really going on here, rather than acting at this surface level of, there's this argument happening. They get down to the, like, what's really going on is grief or whatever. And so I think it's like a reframing. So like I shared, tend to not look at life that way. I don't walk around going like, so what is my role in this? More often than not, I immediately jump in with like, how can I fix it? How can I change it? What can I do? And I'm learning to kind of pause and reflect on, okay, this thing is happening, especially those things that like immediately rile up a bunch of emotions within us, whether that's fear or sadness or anger or disgust or whatever, that instead of immediately reacting to those emotions, kind of like processing them and sitting with like, okay, what is this that is, what is going on in me, rather than like, how can I fix everybody else? Yeah. And so, I mean, I say these things, and like I said, I'm working on them as much as I would encourage other folks to work on them too, because it is my knee-jerk reaction whenever I'm in an uncomfortable situation is to try to fix it.
Yeah. What do you,
as fast as possible.
Do you have any like tips or pointers? So if you're feeling that emotion, you're feeling that anger, that rage, that disgust, that resentment, whatever kind of words, whatever feeling you're feeling, do you have anything that kind of like triggers for you, or something that you do that just like says, okay, this is something I can't control? Is there something that you do, like breathing or something?
Yeah, I definitely think breathing is helpful. And
just for humankind, breathing is a good thing.
Breathing is great. Also, creating separation. I think our culture has taught us so much about immediacy, like our news cycle is immediate. Text messaging is like the idea is that you respond immediately. Like we have our phones and everything, we carry them around. So like we're kind of trained to respond immediately, right? So we kind of think like when something big happens, like I have to have words to say, I have to have actions, I have to like know what to do. And what I'm learning to do is to just stop. And so whether that's like just creating distance between, if it's an interpersonal conflict, just telling the person, hey, I need 5 minutes to go like just sit and process this, or if it's turning off my phone, or if it's scheduling a meeting not for this afternoon but tomorrow, or whatever it is, to kind of just give myself enough space to work through my own feelings. Because obviously, like when something happens, I might be filled with rage in the moment about whatever happened, but 24 hours from then I'm like, okay, like that wasn't that bad, like let me think about it that way. So I think creating space is so important, because we've kind of believed this lie that we have to respond immediately, and we don't. Like we can carve out that space to process. Because I'm pretty sure like the centurion probably didn't like go home, realize that his servant was ill, and then immediately run out the door to Jesus. Like I'm sure there was some time there where he was like, okay, how can I resolve this? Maybe tried something, but maybe also just like, okay, who do I know that could fix this, because I can't, right?
So it was like he kind of surrendered some of his pride in order to move forward. Gosh, I wish. Recently I had an email that I just got upset. I'm like, it should not have happened this way. So I instead of making space, instead of taking a breath, instead of kind of leaving it for tomorrow to handle it when I'm in a better headspace, I was like, no, this is not acceptable. And I sent an email back, and it did not go well. Let's put it that way. I
Yeah.
said something that I probably shouldn't have said. I I made some incorrect inferences, and it didn't go well. And it's because I didn't create that space of,
Hmm.
and I wanted to control it. I wanted to fix it. I said this thing should have happened, but it didn't. And
Right.
there's something to be said about that space of being in a good mindset.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, I got one more question, and then I've got one exciting thing to do at the end with you. But maybe it's not a question, it's a comment. I loved your puzzle image. I think as I think more and more about it, like I loved you holding the pieces, so it gave me some reference of like, oh, she actually does do puzzles.
Yeah.
But I love the image of, okay, we have 20 pieces here, but there's actually 1,000 pieces,
Hmm.
but we can only control our 20 pieces.
Hmm.
And God kind of makes this beautiful picture of those 20 pieces that we have in our partnership with it, and also with the 980 other pieces that we don't have control over.
Hmm.
Um, and I just thought that image was like that kind of was the crux of the whole sermon for me. That
Hmm.
was so good,
Hmm.
um, and really helped me remember kind of the beauty of things out of the control. So I don't know if it's just a comment, but I love that image.
Yeah, no, and that was funny, like that that made the sermon memorable. And I was one of those things that it just occurred to me in that marinating space,
Hmm.
that I've said before to people, like, pastors seek tangible things to do a lot of times because their work is not always tangible.
Yeah.
So like I know pastors who like love mowing their lawn because it's like a rhythmic thing that they do, and when they're done, it's like I mowed the lawn. For me, it's like I put a puzzle together, or I like to cook and bake, and so it's like I made this thing. Like there's a tangible outcome for my effort. And so I've always kind of thought about puzzles that way since I've been in ministry. But again, this was like in conversation with my spiritual director. I've oftentimes talked to her about, like, a lot of times I come to God with kind of my arms full of like all the junk. And I literally just imagine like broken pieces of things, like a shard of this, like this, toy that doesn't work anymore or whatever. And I just kind of, this is what my life feels right now. And then I just like drop it and I'm like, here, like, I don't know. This is all a bunch of junk. I
Yeah.
can't do anything with it. Like, hopefully you can make something out of this. And so that's really kind of what started that, like, metaphor in my mind. And I also have used this metaphor. I did that metaphor with the kids, and a bunch of them afterwards were like, I want to do a puzzle now.
Yeah.
So I got some of them some puzzles to do afterwards because
Awesome.
they were really excited about that. But also I love the image of stained glass.
Hmm.
I love the image of quilting, like any of these images that involve like little scraps and shards of things that on their own don't mean anything, and then we bring them together and they make something significant. I think that is just such an overarching metaphor for what God does in our lives all the time. And we've talked about here at the children's home, like when cruddy things happen, it feels like you're left with a bunch of pieces.
Hmm.
And then we've like used that image of like mosaic or stained glass to talk about how God makes something really beautiful out of things that we look at and are like, this is useless. Like I can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like all of those thoughts are metaphors that I regularly reach for, especially when I'm talking to kids about what it's like to experience resurrection, what it's like to experience God's love, that transformation. And so that's kind of where the puzzle thing came into play. But yeah, I credit the Spirit for that one, because I wouldn't have thought of it on my own. It just kind of bubbled up one day, and
Well, you had to listen to it. You had to listen
yeah.
to Spirit, and you had to say, okay, that's a good idea. Let me write that down.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, that was awesome. That was great. I loved it. All right,
And
the final.
hopefully, though, one last thing is that the other side, flip side, you could take that metaphor a different way and say, like, we all have our 20 pieces, and if we all worked together, we could make a really pretty picture.
Hey.
Yeah. So, like, if the church is the church, we can co-create with God, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's That's a. I might steal that sermon illustration. For those of you who
Please do.
watch, for those of you watching, in a couple of weeks, if you hear a sermon about puzzle pieces, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing, because we're about running out of time here.
Okay.
Madeline and I were talking earlier, and I was telling her that normally songs don't pop up in my head as a sermon is happening, but I had 3 different songs that came to my mind as you were preaching, which is very strange because it's never happened before, and they fit so well,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to share these 3 with you, and then I want to hear your thoughts and comments.
Okay.
Okay, so the first song that came to my mind was an Eminem song. Um, my favorite music is rap music,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought about the song "Lose Yourself" by Eminem,
Okay.
and like for in this passage, the centurion had to lose himself in order to gain something else.
Mm-hmm.
An Eminem song about just lose yourself, just lose, like that, like that whole song, like is all about losing yourself, and then the craziness about actually losing yourself. That came to my head first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, and I think it's probably because you said this 4 or 5 times, but "Let It Go" from Frozen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let it go, like letting your stuff go, letting
Mm-hmm.
the desire to hold things tightly, and letting it go.
Mm-hmm.
That was my second one. The third one was a Gungor song called "Dry Bones." And at the end, you talked about how there's this beauty about um, these unplanned things being something beautiful. And I thought about the song "Dry Bones," and it starts with "These bones cry out to you," and then they have life of these dry bones. And that's what God does in Ezekiel, and what God does over time, creating these life out of death, life out of uncontrol. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so those are my 3 songs.
I also thought about "Let It Go," and maybe
Okay.
that's just something that, like, the minute you say those 3 words, all you
Yeah.
can think of is "Let It Go,"
Yeah.
and you're instantly Elsa in a nice castle. But, but I do think that there are a good number of songs, and maybe that's something you could have people post in comments about. Like, are there other songs that maybe help you to let go or to relinquish control,
Yeah.
or that like articulate that feeling of losing yourself, but not in a losing yourself like forgetting who you are, but like a losing yourself in just like, I mean, somebody might jokingly say, Jesus, take the wheel, but I mean,
Yes. Yes.
but like with the literal, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
take, take this.
Yeah.
And because it's not serving me to be the one in control anymore.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I always love that. I'm one of those people that like someone will say something and it triggers lyrics in my head. So I totally get that you would, I mean,
Yeah.
that's something I would do is like hear a
Yeah.
sermon, hear something and it triggers like a certain song,
Yeah.
and then I'll be singing it all day.
Maybe your spirit was just resonating with my spirit and like telling me, hey, these are the songs that Madeline would have thought of.
Yeah. I don't know about the Eminem
Maybe
one.
the Eminem, but so if those of you who are watching or listening, you can put it in the comments what kind of song resonates with you. And it might not even be a song that has words, but it might be a song that just has this feel. There's a song called "Weight Off," WEIGHT, "Weight Off" by Katrinata, and it's a song that we did at a MLab group that we did a moving prayer to,
Oh,
and this
cool.
was in January. But it's one of my favorite songs. It's just it takes the weight off of like wanting to control everything, and you just vibe and you move, and like that will be my non-verbal song. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I'll have to think about that and maybe comment on
yeah,
when we post the
comment
video.
when this is pushed live
Yeah.
for sure.
I'll have to ponder on that one
Yeah,
some.
yeah.
Let that marinate all week.
There you go. There you go. All right.
Yeah.
Any final things, Madeline? Thoughts, comments?
I am just grateful to have the opportunity, and I'm grateful for you and for your words. And I really hope that people see this as an encouragement to just keep on keeping on in this really hard time and know that it's okay to not keep on, that you can stop and you can let God do that for you. So.
That's a great ending. Madeline, thank you. Thank you for preaching, for having this conversation. for being a good friend over all these years, and for just this awesome conversation. I think I had like 5 or 6 more questions that we didn't even get to. So thank you, thank you, thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, your laughter, your personality, and just sharing, being vulnerable and sharing all about yourself. So thank you.
Thanks,
Um,
Phil.
for those of you watching, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to put your comments about the song that comes to mind. And we will see you again. We won't have a midweek conversation, but we will have a sermon for you as we keep moving forward. So go forth in grace and peace.